Hi, Mom. Hi, Dad. The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet wasn't just a wholesome family sitcom. It was television's longest-running experiment in turning private life into primetime spectacle. Behind the cheery banter and idyllic family dinners, chaos simmered. Contract battles, awkward romances, and storylines blurring dangerously with reality. Cast injuries, bizarre fan obsessions, and network meddling shaped the show in ways audiences never saw. Today, we'll peel back the curtain on 20 weird facts about the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet. And stick around, because the bonus fact is something even lifelong fans rarely hear whispered. Ready? Let's dive in. The show started on radio by accident. Before it hit television in 1952, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet began on radio in 1944. But it wasn't planned as a show. Ozzie Nelson was guest hosting a radio variety program when producers suggested a sitcom segment. Listeners loved hearing the Nelsons' real-life banter, and Ozzie, ever the opportunist, expanded it into a full series. At first, actors played the Nelson sons, David and Ricky, because they were too young. This odd arrangement meant the family America heard wasn't entirely real. But by 1949, the boys joined, and the public was hooked. It wasn't just family radio, it was a prototype for reality TV, decades before the genre existed. What audiences didn't realize, the whole thing started by accident. Ozzie Nelson controlled everything. Unlike most sitcom stars, Ozzie wasn't just acting. He wrote, directed, and produced nearly every episode. He even oversaw editing, making sure the family's image stayed spotless. Insiders joked he was less a TV dad and more a benevolent dictator. Harriet once admitted Ozzie would rewrite lines minutes before shooting if he thought they made the family look foolish. It wasn't comedy, it was reputation management. The result? A show that lasted 14 seasons, making it the longest-running live-action sitcom of its era. But the cost was steep. Cast and crew often felt suffocated by Ozzie's perfectionism. He wasn't just playing dad, he was guarding the Nelson brand with an iron grip. Ricky Nelson's stardom created tension. When Ricky began performing songs on the show in 1957, ratings skyrocketed. Teenage girls tuned in just to see him, turning a gentle family sitcom into an unexpected launchpad for a rock and roll career. Ricky's single, "I'm Walkin'," sold 1 million copies after debuting on the show. But here's the twist. Ozzie only allowed Ricky's performances because he thought it would keep him out of trouble. Instead, Ricky eclipsed his father in popularity. Ozzie, the man who built the Nelson empire, suddenly found himself upstaged in his own living room. It wasn't just TV anymore. It was the birth of a teen idol, right under Dad's watchful eye. The Nelsons used their real home. Sort of. What audiences saw as the Nelson home wasn't a set built from scratch. It was a replica of their real house in Hollywood. Ozzie insisted on copying the family's actual decor down to the wallpaper, believing it made the show feel more authentic. But there was a dark twist. Strangers started showing up at their actual home, assuming the family really lived in the TV version. Harriet later admitted it was unsettling. Fans treated them like neighbors, dropping by unannounced. By blurring fact and fiction, the Nelsons invited America into their living room, but at the cost of their privacy. It wasn't set dressing, it was an invasion. Harriet almost quit the show. Though Harriet Nelson was the heart of the series, she nearly walked away. In the early years, she resented giving up her own career. She'd been a popular big band singer before marrying Ozzie. Playing the idealized TV mom sometimes felt like a trap. In interviews, she confessed Ozzie's creative control frustrated her, especially when scripts ignored her ideas. At one point, she threatened to quit unless her role was expanded beyond cooking dinner and smiling. Ozzie reluctantly gave her more witty lines and story arcs. Harriet's near exit could have ended the series before it became a staple. She wasn't just the mom, she was the glue holding the whole illusion together. Ricky's love life was scripted, literally. In the late 1950s, Ricky Nelson's dating life became tabloid fodder. Teenage girls worshipped him. and Ozzie knew the frenzy could boost ratings. So he began weaving Ricky's real girlfriends, or thinly disguised versions, into the show's scripts. This meant storylines often mirrored Ricky's actual romances. Fans thought they were watching harmless sitcom dating plots, but they were really seeing Ricky's private life dramatized for entertainment. Ricky later admitted it was strange having his relationships turned into punchlines. The blurring of fiction and reality wasn't just risky, it created pressure on Ricky to live up to a TV version of himself. In effect, Ozzie was producing both his son's career and his love life. The show avoided politics at all costs. During the 1950s and 60s, American TV was rife with patriotic themes, Cold War undertones, and sometimes outright propaganda. But the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet stood apart. Ozzie banned political references, no talk of wars, protests, or civil rights. The show lived in a bubble where the greatest crisis was a lost football or a botched date. Critics mocked it for being too safe, but Ozzie believed keeping the family out of politics was the secret to longevity. Behind the scenes, crew members sometimes argued it made the show feel fake. But to Ozzie, it wasn't about reflecting reality, it was about selling perfection, not politics, but permanence. David Nelson resented his role. While Ricky basked in Teenage Idol fame, older brother David quietly grew resentful. Unlike Ricky, David had no singing career to fuel his popularity. He often played the straight man on the show, stuck in bland plots while Ricky got the spotlight. Interviews later revealed David wanted to direct and produce, but Ozzie kept him in front of the camera. "I was just there to make Ricky look good," David admitted years later. The dynamic mirrored sibling rivalry, but with cameras rolling. David loved his family, but felt trapped in the shadow of his brother's fame and his father's control. It wasn't just fiction, it was real family tension projected to millions. Harriet broke a taboo by wearing pants. Television moms in the 1950s were almost always in dresses and pearls. Harriet Nelson defied that stereotype by occasionally wearing slacks on the show. At the time, this was controversial. Some network executives worried it looked too casual or even unladylike. But Harriet pushed for it, arguing it reflected how women actually dressed at home. Audiences noticed. Letters poured in, both praising and criticizing her choice. It may seem trivial today, but in the 1950s, Harriet quietly challenged TV's rigid gender roles. She wasn't just America's mom. She was subtly rewriting the image of domestic femininity on primetime television. The family faced real tragedies off-screen. What audiences didn't know was that behind the laughs, the Nelsons endured painful struggles. Harriet battled depression during the height of the show, feeling isolated despite her fame. Ricky's rise as a teen idol left him overworked and exhausted. Ozzie grew paranoid about keeping the family's perfect image intact. Off-screen, they weren't the flawless household America saw every week. They were a family under immense strain. The irony is striking. A show designed to project harmony often filmed during moments of very real unhappiness. It wasn't sitcom magic, it was survival. And before we move to fact number 11, go ahead and like and subscribe, because the next revelation will change the way you see this show forever. Ricky's performances changed the music industry. When Ricky Nelson sang on Ozzie and Harriet, it wasn't just a ratings gimmick, it revolutionized the music business. Each performance doubled as a built-in commercial for his latest single. After singing Travelin' Man on the show, sales exploded and the record hit #1. This was one of the first examples of cross-promotion between television and the recording industry. Record executives realized a sitcom could sell millions of records, and Ricky became a pioneer in TV to radio stardom. It wasn't just entertainment, it was marketing genius. But behind the scenes, Ricky sometimes resisted being treated like a product. He wanted to be respected as a musician, not just Ozzie's son on TV. Still, his reluctant performances ended up rewriting the rules of pop culture commerce. Ozzie kept tight control of the boy's image. Unlike other teen stars of the 1950s, David and Ricky weren't allowed to appear in publicity stunts without Ozzie's approval. He screened interviews, rejected photo spreads he didn't like, and even dictated how they dressed on and off camera. To Ozzie, they weren't just his sons. They were brand ambassadors for the Nelsons. Friends recalled Ozzie once pulled Ricky from a magazine cover shoot because the photographer wanted him in a leather jacket, which Ozzie thought looked too rebellious. Ironically, Ricky later leaned into that rebellious look as part of his rock and roll persona. But in the sitcom years, Ozzie's control was suffocating. Not just parenting, but public relations, all under one roof. Harriet secretly disliked the fame. While Ozzie thrived on the spotlight, Harriet Nelson often longed for privacy. Friends revealed she hated when strangers approached her in grocery stores, expecting her to act like Harriet from TV. She once confided, "People think they know me. They don't." For Harriet, the show blurred her real identity, making her feel trapped in a character she didn't choose. The irony was brutal. The very role that made her beloved also isolated her. Ozzie may have seen the show as his masterpiece, but Harriet often felt it robbed her of a normal life. The perfect mom on screen wasn't always the person she wanted to be. The show used canned laughter sparingly. Unlike other sitcoms of the era, The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet didn't rely heavily on canned laughter. Ozzie insisted the comedy should feel natural, not forced. But this decision often backfired. Without constant laugh cues, some audiences didn't know when to laugh, and critics sometimes called the show flat. Ozzie defended the choice, claiming, "We're not trying to tell people what's funny." Ironically, this subtlety may have contributed to the show's dated feel compared to louder, joke-driven sitcoms. Not laugh tracks, but lived-in rhythms. That was Ozzie's gamble. And while it may not have pleased critics, it gave the show its unique, almost documentary-like tone. Ricky nearly left the show at his peak. By the early 1960s, Ricky's music career was booming, and the show often clashed with his touring schedule. He considered quitting multiple times but stayed to avoid disappointing his parents. Producers feared the ratings would collapse without him. Ozzie even structured entire episodes around Ricky's musical performances to keep him invested. But Ricky admitted in interviews that he often felt trapped between being a rock star and a sitcom son. Staying on the show wasn't about career, it was about family loyalty. Ironically, the very platform that launched him also became the chain holding him back. What audiences didn't see was Ricky's quiet yearning for freedom. The show inspired early reality TV. The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet blurred lines between scripted fiction and reality. Decades before reality TV existed, the family played themselves, lived in a replica of their real house, and reenacted scenarios drawn from actual daily life. Audiences loved the intimacy. It felt like peeking through the Nelsons' windows. But this blending wasn't innocent. Ozzie carefully curated which aspects of their lives to reveal, creating a version of reality that was polished, safe, and often misleading. TV historians now argue the show was a direct ancestor to programs like Keeping Up with the Kardashians. Only instead of glamour and scandal, it sold domestic perfection. Not a sitcom, but a soft scripted life performance, years before anyone had the term for it. David became the family's quiet pioneer. Overshadowed by Ricky's stardom, David Nelson eventually carved his own path behind the camera. During the later seasons, Ozzie allowed him to direct several episodes, marking David as the first member of the family to step outside his assigned TV role. This shift gave him confidence, and a career he later pursued in directing and producing after the show ended. Yet, his contributions often went unnoticed by fans focused on Ricky's music or Ozzie's micromanagement. David's behind-the-scenes work is now seen as quietly groundbreaking. He wasn't just a character on his father's show. He was helping redefine it from the inside out. It wasn't applause he sought, but independence. Network executives wanted more drama. By the mid-1960s, the show was struggling to stay relevant. NBC executives pressured Ozzie to add more dramatic plots, family conflicts, social issues, even crime-related episodes. Ozzie flatly refused. He believed the Nelson brand rested on wholesomeness and calm storytelling. Behind the scenes, This caused clashes with the network. Ozzie fought to keep the scripts light, even if it meant losing ground to edgier shows like Bewitched or the Beverly Hillbillies. Ironically, his refusal to adapt may have hastened the show's decline. Not conflict, but comfort. That was Ozzie's line in the sand. It preserved the Nelson image, but cost them younger audiences. Ricky's exit episode was awkwardly handled. When Ricky finally began pulling away from the show in the mid-1960s, the transition was clumsy. Instead of a big farewell, episodes simply phased him out. One week, he was crooning on the family couch. The next, he was barely mentioned. Fans noticed and flooded the network with letters asking where Ricky had gone. Ozzie, ever protective, refused to dramatize his son's departure, fearing it would hurt Ricky's career. But in avoiding the drama, he created confusion. The result? One of the strangest character disappearances in sitcom history. Not closure, but silence. The show's legacy outlived its popularity. By 1966, after 14 years on television, the adventures of Ozzie and Harriet ended quietly. It no longer commanded the ratings it once did, and younger audiences gravitated toward more modern sitcoms. But its influence was enormous. It pioneered family-based storytelling, teen cross-promotion, and reality sitcom hybrids. Shows like Full House, The Brady Bunch, and even modern family reality shows all trace their DNA back to Ozzie's empire. The Nelsons weren't just a family, they were the blueprint. And though critics dismissed the show as too sweet, its structure shaped television history in ways few realize. The real-life Nelson curse. Here's the most haunting revelation. After the show ended, tragedy seemed to stalk the Nelson family. Ricky died in a plane crash in 1985 at just 45 years old. Ozzie passed from cancer in 1975, and Harriet followed in 1994. Even the next generation wasn't spared. Ricky's twin sons, who carried on the family's musical legacy, battled personal demons. Fans whisper about the Nelson family curse, a cruel twist for the family once celebrated as America's most perfect household. The irony is chilling. The family that symbolized TV happiness became defined, in part, by real-life loss. The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet wasn't just a sitcom, it was a cultural experiment, a carefully constructed illusion of domestic bliss, and the birth of reality-based television. Behind the smiles were struggles, sacrifices, and stories America never saw. Yet the Nelsons left behind more than episodes. They left a blueprint for how television could shape, sell, and even rewrite family life. So the next time you hear that cheerful theme song, remember, perfection on TV often comes at a price. If you enjoyed uncovering these hidden truths, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment your favorite fact. After all, even the most wholesome shows hide secrets worth telling.